Week 2 is in the books. We've been talking a bunch about the ACC weekend, and I do think it has to start off, though, with what Clemson did to Texas A&M. And you always appreciate a game in the trenches. I thought Clemson dominated up front against the Aggies.
Yeah, they did, and I think they took it personally that they couldn't stop the A&M defense or offense in the second half last year. Kellen Mond and that passing attack just shredded them. And coming into this game, there was a lot of speculation that this defense, losing 3 first-round draft choices on the defensive line and another corner that was drafted, with the same passing attack skill players coming back for A&M for the most part, that they get lit up again. But I think what they did was phenomenal. Brent Venables, the defensive coordinator for Clemson, his whole mantra is pressure breaks pipes. And instead of sitting back and letting those big A&M receivers go to work in the secondary, they came after Mond. I mean, they came after him every way there is to come after a quarterback. And they challenged him to see if he could make decisions and execute physically with some Clemson pass rusher, whether it was a blitzer or a D lineman, breathing down his neck at all times. And I thought the aggression of that was so much fun to watch.
Trevor, the other interesting part, Mark and I were talking about it in our first hour this morning, is that Isaiah Simmons in 2 ball games has really kind of, to paraphrase the Bull Durham line, has kind of announced his presence with authority as a linebacker in college football, really one of the top-level linebackers in college football.
Yeah, Wes, when I went on my off-season tour and stopped at Clemson, they gushed about him. They talked about him being one of those tall, more slender, lanky, new prototype of an NFL linebacker, really, a guy that's tall enough and big enough to be able to run with tight ends and those big receivers, but also can play near the line. And the fact that he has that combination of size and speed, and then when he gets there with some anger, that is the perfect physical specimen to be playing linebacker right now in college and in the NFL. And when it comes to his ability to do the right things with discipline, that's what matters, because you can run around as an unguided missile if you've got great physical specs, and if you go into the wrong spot, you just get there faster, right? You run away from your assignment quicker if you don't do the right things. But the fact that he's asked to do so many things in terms of coverage and rushing and run support and all those things, and he does them all the right way, that mental side of it, I think, gets lost in the spectacular physical plays that he makes.
Trevor, can you explain what in the world happened to Syracuse?
Well, I like the way you phrase that, Pac, but I think it makes a little bit of sense when you dig into it. Maryland's really good. Maryland has been quietly building a really strong, physically strong roster out there, and I think they're a sleeping giant. I thought that for a long time because of the recruiting area that they're in. They call it the DMV, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. There are a lot of football powerhouses there, right in Maryland's backyard, and the previous staff had done a good job of opening up the pipeline from some of those powerhouses into Maryland football. And Mike Locksley is one of the greatest recruiters in college football. I think that pipeline will expand. So we start with the fact that they've got a better roster than they get credit for. Then that quarterback with Josh Jackson transferring over from Virginia Tech, quarterback has been notoriously fragile at Maryland for a long time. Watching that team year after year, it's common for them to be down to their 3rd or even 4th quarterback midway through the season because of injury. All of a sudden now they've got a guy that can play who stayed healthy through 2 games. And if you're a Maryland fan, you're thinking, that's weird. Okay, so Maryland is a solid team that has great belief that you have to stop. Now, the other side of the ball, Syracuse. I think there was a big problem with linebackers, and I think that's where the whole thing started. How was Maryland able to move the ball so well and score so much? Maryland's offense is designed around run-pass options and other schemes that allow the defense to be wrong always. And Mike Locksley likes to say that if the defense doesn't out-execute the offense, they will always be wrong, always be wrong. If it's a fair fight, they will always be wrong. And I think the Syracuse linebackers are a work in progress, and they were always wrong. And it's not necessarily their fault. I think they were overmatched in a lot of ways. But when Syracuse finally had to figure out that they had to sell out to stop the run, then the big pass plays hit, and they just didn't know what to do, and they had no way to get off their heels.
So, Trevor, now Dino Babers and maybe to a degree, what Willie Taggart's got going at Florida State. Now the coaches, and I've often said this is where I think they earn their money, because they got to coach it in the locker room before they face the opponent on Saturday or whatever the case may be. Rebuilding after you get started, though, within the walls of your own facility can sometimes be the toughest person you got to beat all year, right?
That's exactly right, because last year Syracuse, really the last couple of years, Syracuse had belief. Dino Babers is legitimately one of the best coaches in college football, and it showed up on the field over the last couple of years. I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked about at length that in the last 2 years, only 2 teams have beaten Clemson, Alabama and Syracuse almost beat them twice. And the players buy in when they see proof like that what they're being asked to do, which is always hard, especially when a new coaching staff comes in. But college football players, what they're asked to do by coaching staffs is really hard to do. And if you believe that it'll work, if you believe it'll make you successful, and more than that, if you believe it'll make you money in the NFL or it'll make you popular with the ladies, whatever's important to you, then it makes it easier for you to do all that grind. And right now, Syracuse has got to be wondering, well, what we're doing now isn't working. What do we need to do to get this turned around? And anytime any crack in the wall of belief shows up, it's a problem. And here's where the other problem comes from. I don't think anybody in the country, I don't think anybody in that locker room thinks that Maryland is anywhere near the class of Clemson. And yet Maryland just blew the doors off of Syracuse. And now, reeling from that, here come the Clemson Tigers next week, who are bent on avenging the last 2 games that they played against Syracuse. So, this is a real perilous position for the belief in that program among some of the younger players.
We're so glad you're watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports and analysis, download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, make sure you subscribe to ESPN Plus. We'll see you there.